Thank you so much for coming along to today's session on Mahara, supporting lifelong learning and reflection. My name is Kristina Hoeppner, and I'm the project lead of the Mahara open source project located at Catalyst here in Te Whanganui Atara, Wellington in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But we do work with people from around the world, and therefore we are offering these sessions at different times to make it more easily possible for everybody to attend. Now, my mouse just does not want to work. Here we go. Our topic today is Mahara, the portfolio platform that started development work in 2006. So later this year, we will celebrate our 20th anniversary, and it's really exciting, I find, to have seen the platform and also our community in particular grow up around portfolio practice, shift how portfolios are being used, what was envisaged in the beginning for Mahara, and where it has developed into. And so it's really great to see that Mahara is not only used in higher education, tertiary education, but also in workplaces or associations around the world, which of course also then shifts what portfolios look like. And therefore, the more examples we have in the future, the better we can then also see the whole breadth of it. In today's presentation, the focus is more on in a way, general portfolio overview, but I will be covering different types of portfolios as well that are also suitable for different contexts. But before I continue, I'd very much like to know why you are here today. What are you interested in? Are you here for assessment for learning? Do you want to help your learners, be that students, staff, faculty, or other people that you support in their professional journey in assessing what they have learned? Or are you here for a continuous dialogue through feedback? We see that very frequently, not just at the university level, but also in the workplace. For example, when nurses need to go or need to demonstrate competencies throughout a year, that they then use the portfolio also to talk with their managers, talk through feedback and record that, and also have conversations with their peers. Or are you here to prepare your students for employment? Or do you want to support your staff members also for furthering their career, for career advancement? Or are you here because you're interested in lifelong learning and how you can support that within the community that you operate in? So please do feel free to put your answer into the chat. And if you're here even just for one of these items, then you're in the right place, because that is what Mahara can deliver. Mahara is a portfolio platform that can be used quite flexibly for many different scenarios of learning, including formal learning processes all the way to informal and non-formal ones. And therefore, what I'm going to show you today is a glimpse into what is possible with portfolios and why we would actually want to use a portfolio for that. Now I've got a second question for you, and that is, what is your portfolio knowledge stage? So if we were to look at the knowledge stage as a life cycle of a butterfly, we have different major stages that they are in: the egg, caterpillar, chrysalis, and then a butterfly. If you're at the egg stage in the portfolio world, in my view, that is, you've heard about portfolios, you're just getting your feet wet, you're starting out with them, but you're standing in front of a lot of things that you might want to explore. You then become a caterpillar, because from the egg to the caterpillar you grow. The caterpillar munches on everything, learns a lot, reads a lot, listens to people, attends events, has conversations with a lot of people. So really just that ingestion of all the things that they can get their hands on in regards to portfolios. Once they have read a good amount of things and engaged with a lot of different content items, they then be turned into the chrysalis, because that is where then the transformation is happening, where the knowledge, insights, practices, and what people have heard, what they want to do, ideas, all get digested and get put together, put into connection, so that then from that chrysalis, a beautiful butterfly can emerge. And that is not one butterfly, because once you're a chrysalis, if we see a chrysalis, we don't quite know probably what sort of butterfly is coming out of that, because we have many different butterflies. And so the portfolio practice can also look very differently to different people, because every context is different. And therefore, we can have somebody who is very colorful and somebody who might be very reserved and more plain looking on the outside, but still serving a very important purpose. And then, of course, we are going back to the egg state, because at some point there is more to learn. There's more questions that we have around portfolios or things that we want to change, maybe after a first implementation, make some tweaks, talk with the people that are creating portfolios, that are setting the portfolio activities, and then transforming that practice. So it's a continuous learning cycle, continuous growth cycle. So, do you know at which stage you are at? If you do, then you're very welcome to put that into the chat. And so if you're now going back from our metaphor of the butterfly life cycle to the portfolio itself, in Mahara, we always put the learner into the center of attention. So they are the important person, and the portfolio revolves around them. And so we can create many different types of portfolios. I tend to focus on 5 different types. Depending on the literature you read, you might hear slightly different terminology, or you might have, in one book, I think I read up to 25 different types that are then very nuanced. But I do want to keep it relatively simple, and therefore have a bird's eye perspective on 2 types of portfolios. And so the first type, but it doesn't have to start at this type. Any type can be a good starting point. But the first type to look at is the learning portfolio. So that is a portfolio that is also often called developmental portfolio. And so as the name already says, it's all about learning. It's about development. It is about growth. These portfolios are not necessarily shared with others. So I've heard a lot of people just keeping their learning portfolio for themselves, making notes, reflecting on their learning, collecting their evidence, and never really sharing it with anybody, because it is for them, because they want to make sense of their learning. Because we do operate quite a bit in the formal education space, in particular higher education and tertiary education in general, Mahara also supports assessment. And that is assessment where then students get a grade, and instructors can also use various different grading methods. So it's a replacement for other assessment types in order to assess a student's capabilities, competencies, or also knowledge more comprehensively and also more holistically. Because when portfolios are used for assessment, we are still bringing in the portfolio element. So it is not just documenting the evidence, but also reflecting on that evidence, reflecting on what they have learned from the activities that they have done or from the readings that they have done, so that it is not just mirroring back the knowledge, what they have read, but also very much thinking about themselves and how it impacts them. And so that is where the challenge is then often for instructors to transform their learning and their teaching to support those reflective processes. And it is really, really great to see that this is happening in order for students to connect the dots between different classes, connect very different subjects at times, and therefore see the bigger picture of why they are learning what they are learning. We also see portfolios quite a bit in the work integrated learning space. So internships, practicums, when students are away at a company, then they are not so close to the university anymore. But with a portfolio, the students can stay in touch with their tutors or with their advisors and can also receive feedback from them while they are on practicum. And they can even include their workplace mentors in that process if they want to, in order to continue on the learning journey and also to make sense of how does my work at the university connect to the internship. Some of you might have already encountered the showcase portfolio, often also called presentation portfolio, because that is the one that is typically most familiar to people, since they might have already created one themselves without maybe even calling it a portfolio. Because the showcase portfolio is always something that kind of shows off what we have done, what we do well, what we know. And so it is often used for employment purposes. So when you apply for a new job or when you want to change a role, then you can use a portfolio as supporting evidence. And it can also include those reflections to let the audience know why what you are showing is important in your career trajectory and why you are a good candidate for a position. Now, last but not least, we have the professional certification portfolio. That is the one that we typically see in the workplace when people need to exhibit competencies or skills. So that can be nurses, teachers, but also other professionals like plumbers or electricians or engineers, because they often go for a certification. And these days, it is often not enough to just list all the professional development activities that they've participated in and attended, but organizations also want to see the evidence behind it, and they want to have the reflection in order to see what are they taking out of that training with them. So really also to understand where are they headed, do they comprehend what they have learned, and can they apply that also in the workplace. For professional certifications, we sometimes also see that peers are involved or that managers are involved, either for formal or more informal feedback, which can be captured in the platform. Or we do know from nurses here in Aotearoa that while they all have a portfolio online, conversations do happen more outside of the portfolio. So they are really taking advantage of having the portfolio as a basis and then having conversations around it and really making it about that professional development rather than just, okay, I need to be certified and I need to be recertified. So the portfolio helps have rich conversations rather than just being a tick box activity. And so if you're looking at all of these 5 different types together, the learning portfolio, assessment, work integrated learning, showcase, and professional certification portfolios, we see that while they are distinct, they also overlap. And so we can take evidence and reflection from a learning portfolio, put that into a professional certification portfolio. It can also go into a showcase, or maybe in a showcase, we only put the evidence and reflect slightly differently on it. Or for assessment, we add another piece of evidence or also connect it with a competency framework. And so what the electronic platform allows us is to make it so that evidence and any other documentation or thinking is only uploaded or created once, And then it can be repurposed in other types of portfolios, depending on who the audience is and what the purpose is of that portfolio. Now, if you're taking a look at a few examples from, in this case, primarily students, but I also have one for professional certification, then you will see how different portfolios can look. The first example, and you're very welcome to select the link in the live slides if you have them open, or later on once you get the PDF, that you can also click the link in order to navigate through the entire portfolios here. So this first example is from a student at the University of the Arts London. Their Mahara site is called Workflow. And as the name suggests already, it is there for the students to work on their assignments. So they have working, learning, and assessment portfolios on here. Because as an arts university, they do also work with another portfolio platform, which essentially every student who studies arts or design and the like needs to use to then create their showcase portfolio, which they present to their industry. And so Mahara is used primarily for the work product, so pre-presentation. And the portfolios of these students can be quite large. In this case, we have 5 pages within the portfolio, so that the student also nicely organizes all their content and takes their assessors or other people that need to give feedback through their portfolio in a logical manner. They use images and they use text and arrange it in a way that suits them. The second portfolio is also from the University of the Arts London, and in this case, this student even has 15 pages within their portfolio. And again, they work very nicely with multimodal content, putting images in, text, and then in some cases also video. And that's the nice thing about using an online platform like Mahara, because you can do all of that. You can arrange the content as soon as you've arranged it. It is displayed to any viewer like that. You can embed videos, you can upload videos to Mahara as well, in order for people to simply select the content and view it without needing to download it. Because of course, you could create a portfolio in a text document and then, apologies for the reminder, and then share that with somebody, but then the viewer always needs to download it, needs to make sure they have the software available. And so it is better to use Mahara, because then everything can always be changed online directly where you are. You do not even need to be on the same computer. You could start the portfolio on a laptop and then continue on a tablet, or maybe at a workplace at a different computer, and therefore be more device independent in order to keep your portfolio updated and always make sure that you reflect in a timely manner. The third example is from Dublin City University. This student also has a multi-page portfolio, and in this case, the focus is more on text, but they also incorporate a visual in order to make more of a point and therefore have more of an impactful view on their content and make it easier for people to go through the portfolio, because you can also focus on things. So for me, really, the nice thing about using Mahara is to explore how we can work with visual content besides text, and also how we can use audio or video. So in Mahara 2604, it will be possible to record audio and video directly from within the portfolio. That is going to be an experimental feature, because it's not always available in every single browser. So browsers are sometimes limited for it, but we do want to explore if that also changes how people are reflecting on their activities, what they are sharing with others, in order to make it possible for anybody, no matter what their preferences are in terms of working with content and expressing themselves have the opportunity to do so in a medium that suits them most. Now, the last example that I'm showing here, and please do not, you don't need to attempt to read the text. I will pull out important pieces from it. That is the CMALT review portfolio from Teresa McKinnon. She used to be a language instructor at the University of Warwick and created a portfolio for a professional certification for her CMALT to become and also to stay a certified member of the Association of Learning Technologists. And so Teresa really nicely exemplifies what a portfolio is about, because she says, this is a highlight of my professional career. She's not giving us all the content. She's not talking through everything that she has done in her very long career of being a language instructor. No, she focuses on an important aspect or an important event of her career to really illustrate why that was important, what she has learned in order to fulfill a competency within CMALT. She also looks back. She reflects on her learning, the point at which I realized. Again, she's not taking us through a chronological order of things that have happened, but she picks one thing that has been critical for her and talks through that in order to help us understand what she has learned and how she can also grow as a professional. And again, the reflective element, she revisited each of the sections of her previous CMALT submission in order to reflect on that, what she had done in the past, and how she has grown since. But since learning typically does not happen just in a vacuum, she's also very grateful for feedback and mentoring she has received and incorporates that learning in her reflections and in the way that she changed her way of teaching and also way of learning. And so a portfolio, therefore, is very much about the documentation of learning, the reflection on learning, and also making that visible, be that in text with documents, with images, or also illustrations or videos and the like. And therefore give us a really nice comprehensive picture of a person, but not every single detail. And so if you wanted to take a look at a definition, there's folio thinking. The idea of folio thinking was pioneered by Helen Chen at Stanford University. And here we have a nice summary definition that was published by Vicky Suter. And so folio thinking is a process of engaging in the collection, organization, reflection, and connection that leads to a person's ability to speak intelligently and concisely, that means tell stories, about one's learning experiences, what they mean and their value, and how the experiences relate one to each other. And so the portfolio, in short, is all about telling stories, because learners tell their learning story. They talk about themselves, what they have learned, what they've gained from that learning, and what they are going to do, but not necessarily just in, as I said, in that chronological order, but more in a story, because we learn through stories, and stories really also help us remember things. And so folio thinking is that story about ourselves. And we collect, organize, reflect, and then connect with others. For Mahara, if we break that down into 5 easy actions and activities that we can do, there are 5 C's. The first one is create, because it all starts with the learning. And that actually typically happens outside of the portfolio. That happens in the workplace, that happens on a daily commute, that happens at any time. So we have our learning content, our evidence. that we then collect within the portfolio. So uploading documents or writing text directly into the portfolio space. So you could kind of imagine it like a big shoebox, for example, where you put everything in that you have done throughout a year, and you let it sit there, and then at some point you get to it and you curate over it. You look at it, you pull things out, you might throw some things away when they are not as relevant anymore, or you might want to keep certain things in a very special place. And so the curation element is really that important part of the whole portfolio activity, because that is where you organize and also reflect on your learning. And then we have the conversational piece. That is where you then, once you have created the portfolio, invite others to come along, take a look at it, have chats with you, make comments, leave feedback, either on an entire portfolio or on parts of the portfolio, in order to help you along in that learning process. And lastly, we can also collaborate on portfolios. You can create group portfolios so that multiple people contribute to a portfolio, or have conversations within a community of learning in order to then work together. So we do provide both the personal space as well as the group space. And so if you wanted to look at a metaphor, you could say the portfolio is almost like a museum, or as in like an art gallery. In the basement, we've got the curator, who has all the artifacts and already lots of other things collected. And they then pick what they want to make visible in a particular exhibition. Because in an exhibition, we never see everything that is in the archives of a museum. We always only see a selection, which is then enhanced by the commentary that the curator makes, by helping us make the connections between the individual pieces that we see in a particular room. And then within that room, which can be our portfolio, you have people looking at the evidence. They have conversations, they might talk to the curator, they might have a tour of the portfolio, and they can also leave feedback around the exhibit that they've seen. Sometimes exhibits are not just one room, though, because they can be quite large. So we might have 2 or 3 rooms. And then for Mahara, that would be our portfolio collection, so that you can go from one room to the next, and you know how they are organized. You can see thematic threads going through, and you can look at everything in context. Some exhibits might require you to pay an entrance fee. So in Mahara, we can make portfolios private and only shareable with a few people, or they can be entirely public, like on a museum's open day that you can look at everything. If you prefer a different metaphor, and I'd very much like to invite you to think about your own metaphor, how you would like to explain portfolios to your community. Because, of course, everybody is different, and so some metaphors might resonate more with others. So we've also seen things like a wardrobe or a fridge or a garden, and so there's lots of ways to explain portfolios. Here we've got the portfolio as a performance. So there we've got private practice rooms. So that is the preparation of the portfolio. That might also happen with a couple of other people involved. And once somebody is ready to showcase their portfolio, they could go onto stage and invite others to view their portfolio, to see what they have come up with, and then have a chat afterwards in the follow-up or in conversations. So think about the context in which you're using portfolios and how you might like to explain them. Now, Mahara has been around for a while. I think I mentioned earlier that we are going to celebrate our 20th anniversary later this year. And so the platform has evolved over all of these years, has changed, and has always looked into how we can support our community so that there are features available that support the type of learning and support the type of teaching that they want to do. And so we have developed a roadmap, and you can look into that further, including also more accessible way of navigating through it by being able to select text and search for text, is that we have looked at the current portfolio practice little over a couple of years ago, and what our community has told us in order to see, well, in what sort of ways do people want to engage with portfolios in the future? What should we make available? What should we make possible within Mahara? And so that's what is now on the roadmap. These are ideas, sometimes already very concrete ideas, especially in the now and in the next stages. Whereas other ideas, in particular, if we are looking at the later stage, might be a bit more uncertain of what it actually means. And those are then the opportunities that we will have with you to look into these items more and see, okay, so what does that mean to you specifically? What would you like to see in this feature in order to have benefits for your community? And so we will again engage with our community in order to elicit more information, elicit scenarios of what they want to see in particular areas of Mahara. The roadmap is also a living thing. So it is not static. This is not our work plan for the next few years and for the current years. As you can see, there's a number of things already in the done section. But it is something that we are reviewing on a regular basis in order to validate, are the ideas that are on the roadmap, especially the ones that are further out, still relevant? Should they still be investigated? Should we look into getting projects together? Or should we focus on something else? Because, of course, technology changes very rapidly, in particular also now with artificial intelligence, ways of learning, ways of using technology in education changes. And so we do want to respond to these changes and therefore have the conversations on an ongoing basis in order to see what we might need to put onto the roadmap, what we might need to investigate, and what we might need to let go of because it is not relevant anymore in 2, 3, or 4 years' time. So do watch out for any of those things that we will be publishing in the community to invite you into conversations in order to help us understand better how you're using Mahara, what is important in your portfolio practice, so that we can see how that marries up also with what others are thinking. Now we are coming to a number of resources and events because there's always a lot going on and also lots of free resources available because the portfolio community does like to share and share the knowledge around in order to help each other. And we've seen a number of collaborations happen across borders in the past, which have been very, very fruitful in order to advance portfolio practice on not just one institution, but sometimes 2, 3, or more. And so the first thing that, if you're not already subscribed to it, is the monthly newsletter that I publish on the first Wednesday of each month, New Zealand time, in which I share events, ideas of how to use portfolios, in particular also from the podcast interviews, and then ways of how you can engage with the community, and also a tip for Mahara every single month. Next, if you want to chat with us, you can come along to our Mahara Ask Me Anything sessions. They are designed for anybody to come along, no matter in which stage of the portfolio knowledge lifecycle they are. They are not technical sessions. We can talk about technology. We can talk about pedagogical ideas. We can talk about practice, or also just look at a particular thing that you are currently working on and don't quite know what to make of it or how to use something in Mahara. So it's really ask me anything about Mahara and portfolio practice, so that you also get to know our team and our team gets to know you. You might also already be familiar with the podcast, Create, Share, Engage. It is available on all our audio podcast apps and also on podcast.mahara.org, where you have by now a wealth of interviews. Currently, we are at episode 92. Where you can hear about how differently people use portfolios around the world. Sometimes there's ideas of how to start an implementation, how to use portfolios at scale, having fun activities and ways of engaging learners to create their portfolio, to complete their portfolio. And also a big focus is on how to support portfolio implementations, because often there's only a very small group at a university that works on portfolios. And so how can they be supported? How can they be effective? And also with whom can they engage outside of their institutions in order to get support? So that's all packed into Create, Share, Engage. And I'd like to invite you to listen to it. If you're more into reading things, there's also heaps of resources online. Here's just a very small selection of them. And we have the ABLE Digital Ethics Principles, which are a very good starting point to make sure to keep digital ethics in mind, like data sovereignty, data residency, but also equity, inclusion, belonging, decolonization, in order to see, well, how can we engage everybody into portfolios and make it so that they can find themselves and that they can bring in their whole selves. The Field Guide to ePortfolio is also a very wonderful resource, typically very short chapters, and therefore giving a bit more of an executive summary of various aspects of portfolios that, if you're starting out, you might like to look into. The two publications here in the middle, they are wonderful case studies of how portfolios have been used, in particular in higher education, around assessment. And we see very brief case studies from different departments that highlight how portfolios have been used, and also very much so how Mahara has been used within those frameworks. Dublin City University also published the Learning Portfolio in Higher Education, a game of snakes and ladders, which is a great literature review on the learning portfolio, as well as also gives ideas of how to implement it. Last but not least, the latest edition here in those free resources is the book Digital Resilience of ePortfolios. It is a collection of articles around research and also practice into portfolios and how they can support resilience in learning, especially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the lessons that have been learned that apply to the future. It is a long read. It is 730 pages, and so packed full with lots and lots of stories from around the world. So really something awesome to look into. And if you'd like to meet the editors of the book, as well as also some of the authors, we do have a webinar planned from ABLE and also Flans in May, where they will be talking about the book. And Empo and Modise and also Norm Vaughan were on the podcast talking about their book just a few weeks ago. And so I hope this has now given you a small insight into what you can use portfolios for in quite different contexts, from learning to assessment, work integrated learning, so more practical applications, showcasing learning, and then also thinking about portfolios in professional certification scenarios. And so I would very much like to invite you now to think about where you are at in your portfolio lifecycle and what your next steps are. What do you want to explore? What do you want to try out in order to bring portfolios to your community, or also to enhance and maybe change what you're already currently doing and trying something new? So I'd love to hear how you're doing that. Thank you.